So I've got my headphones on for you today because our central air is broke and we're using a couple of portable units, the kind on casters that you roll across the floor and you vent out the window. Plus then we're using fans to push the cool through the house. So I tried using my hands-free speaker or my headset-free speaker, but the roar of the fans was just too loud and distracting. The reason that I'm coming to you today is because I wanted to do part 2 of my resume, my biblical calendar resume, of why you should consider anything I have to say about the development of the barley, the wheat, the 7 species, the timing of the biblical calendar on the land of Israel. In the first interview, I touched a little bit on my daily life, but not much. But what I predominantly did was just give you some general information and touch briefly on the calling of the Holy Spirit on my life here in Israel, about how Elohim used the story of Ruth in the book of Ruth and told me I would be as a Ruth, and how I didn't understand that to its fullest, and probably still don't understand it completely to its fullest even yet, how I didn't understand it to its fullest last year because I didn't make the connection in 2003 to the barley and the wheat. And because I had arrived in Israel and was married to my husband, I didn't consider the rest of the story. But he's perfect in that area, and he doesn't miss a detail. So now today I want to take you onto the property, and I want to show you that, as I said in the previous video, that even before I was connected to a piece of earth, I knew the importance of being connected to the land, to understand the pages from Genesis that begins in a garden to Revelation, where the angel who's in the cloud, like the Son of Man, the command is to put in the sickle and harvest, for the harvest of the earth has come. How the whole pages in between speak an agricultural language in the literal law, which is also spiritual, and in the parables and allegories that fill its pages. So even before I had the garden, I'll take a little rabbit trail here. Growing up, we called it hunting. We have a fancy word for it today. It's called foraging. But back then, the family just went mushroom hunting, or we just went hunting for polk, or when I lived in Idaho, it was asparagus, or we knew where the wild blackberries were. We'd go pick blackberries. And then, mom and dad always had a large garden. We grew a lot of things every year. Lots of tomatoes. I can remember lots of tomatoes and okra and green beans, and oh my goodness, we had so much food on the shelf in canning jars and in the freezer. Strawberries, mulberry tree. And then as I had my children as a single parent, I grew things just because, it was the way to make the dollar stretch. And I had a big garden. We would glean behind the local grapes in Northwest Arkansas. Of course, I remember one year I found a huge abandoned apple orchard with just a large variety of apples, Jonathan, and oh my goodness, don't even remember, so many different types. A lot of them were cooking apples, and most of them were cooking apples, I think. And I made so much apple butter that year, canned. The kids ate it like applesauce. Forget about putting it on bread. They ate it like applesauce. So there's always been that connecting to the earth in my entire life. So when I landed in Israel, before we had this property, I took a foraging class, and that was the beginning of my connection to the earth. In the spring, we don't plant any mustard. Why plant it when there's 3 varieties that grows here in the land of Israel? Every wet season it comes up. Mallow comes up. Oh my goodness, lamb's quarter, garlic, wild onions. Oh, the redbud trees, those blooms are delicious in salad. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. There's so much edible food here. So in the spring, we forage as much of the wild plants as we can because they're free and they're organic. But when I moved here, I knew immediately that I was supposed to be developing the property as best as I can. Um, we're told that this land was a land of milk and honey, and it's not anymore. It's still under the curse of the law that they break on a daily basis. But it also says that if we obey, that he will give us peace on our land and abundance. So let's see, going into my 3rd growing season here, we've been keeping the biblical calendar and resting on those days of Shabbat, on the days of rest for the feast dates. We've been keeping that calendar according to how I see the barley developing on the land, and the results are miraculous. So let's go to the garden and take a look. And this is my resume. I'm just going to name names, and I don't have to be ugly about it, but I want you to know that I don't think that Devorah's date tree has any connection to the earth other than the barley inspections. I think that she lives in an apartment in Jerusalem and only goes out for barley inspections. I know that Yoel Halevi is a Torah teacher, and that's his predominant job, is teaching biblical Hebrew and that aspect of life. I do know I hear his father is an arbalist. He mentioned that, but that's not the same as knowing when the tender greens first emerge out of the earth. But his time is predominantly spent in Torah. I know that Abib of God, they've been coming to Israel for a lot of years, but their experience is at a very, very tight window of time on the land of Israel. And he's looking for something completely different based on those 18 years of experience without having been connected to the earth for 12 months out of the year. As far as I know, I am the only Torah inspector that not only is connected to the earth 12 months out of the year, but has successfully developed a forested garden as a permaculture in the desert we call Israel. In August, Gregorianly speaking, end of July, when our temperatures are 107 degrees and the heat on the land comes up in waves and just strangles you, and the dust sticks to your sweat, and it looks like the land can never live again. My garden is green. It is miraculous. I had no idea what the earth would yield here. But enough about my words. Let's go look in the garden and see what Elohim has allowed me to do in Israel, so you can see that I do understand a little bit about growing things and how they grow and how they respond and when they should come up and how they should come up here in Israel. In the first clip, I want to show you the before, and I will be showing you little sections in comparison throughout what is, so that you can see the what is and what was before. So first of all, we're going to see the before. And this was before I had really done, well, you'll see, there was nothing going on. There was not even any wood mulch on the ground at this point. Welcome to my sustainable forested garden. Let's go inside. We have to go underneath this very gorgeous passiflora that is just covered with fruit this year. Did not mean for it to take over the garden. Things have grown too good. There's always weeds to clean up. Not really weeds, but dead stuff to cut back. So in 2019, I just got a clip on my timeline that showed me that in 2019, I was still, me personally, carrying wood chips onto the property. I've covered a quarter of an acre with 8-ish to 10-ish, 11-ish centimeters of wood mulch. This was fresh green pine mulch, needles to trunk, the whole tree shredded and dumped in my driveway. It filled my whole driveway. And it took me about, of course I had my daughter here during the time, we took a significant break, took a couple of significant breaks. It took me about 6 months to finish the process. But in 2019, this was naked earth. There was nothing here. I had this big beautiful olive tree, which is basically pretty much doubled in girth with the wood chips. And I had the lemon tree, let me get out of the olive tree, the lemon tree in the background. There's my papaya tree, the lemon tree past it. That's what was on the property in 2019. So I've had one complete growing cycle with the wood chips. And this has happened on the property in less than a 2-year growing season. I did nothing to the earth besides place drip irrigation between the earth and the wood chips. That eggplant, which goes from there to there and is equally as wide, and it's just laden with eggplants. I put this in the first year. The mulch was down enough for me to put something in the earth. So this is his second season. No, he's had 2 cutbacks. This is his 3rd season, the same plant producing eggplant, and every year he's bigger when I cut him back and he returns. Now I want to show you the point that I've reached in the garden, and that is that this is my Swiss chard, and it looks kind of sad, and that's my kale, and it looks kind of sad, and my kale has aphids, and I'm fine with that, because what I want this to do is I want this to go to seed. And as it goes to seed, what I'm doing, see if I can find one that's good enough. No, all these tops are still pretty green. When these seed tops get brown enough, I strip the seeds by hand, I throw them on top of the wood chips, and I chop the plant down. See if I can show you one. Chop the plant back to the earth. Here's one right here. You can see he's been chopped back to the earth. And he will come back from the roots. And of course the seeds. Here's another one I've chopped back to the earth. And of course the seeds will give me new plants every year. I started with just a few plants here. This year I had so much Swiss chard, I was giving it away wholesale. I mean, I just had more than I could manage. I'll take the kale and I'll propagate it over into this blank area here. as well what is happening. And yes, my tomato plants are on the ground. They're a vine. They are supposed to be on the ground. Is my tomato plants came back. I did not plant these. They've come back of their own. So what is it I'm doing here? If you don't know, I'm working with the season that Elohim presents me on the earth. Hollyhocks, one of the hardest things in the whole world to propagate from seeds. All of these are volunteer. All of these are going to be short this year because they're volunteer from seeds, and I've let other seeds fall in here, so that'll be filled up starting next year. These will be as big as this. My hollyhocks, I don't know if you can see how tall they are. Okay, that's the wire there, and they're just about 3 foot from the wire. Okay, they're all so very tall, they're just bent over. Let's see, of course there's a mango tree I've planted. This tree was dead and this tree was dead. I cut the trunk back, they both come back to life. And by dead, I mean that there was no bark and it was bleached white, just like that. This tree was just a couple of meters tall when I planted it 2 seasons ago. Pomegranate tree, just a twig when I planted it. Moringa, I started from seed. I've got several moringa in here. There's one back over there, you can see. You can see behind the pomegranate tree. This guy, I call him a butterfly plant. I don't even know what it is. First 2 seasons I tried to propagate seeds, could not do it. This year all the seeds that dropped from the previous year made a huge bush. It was a small pot when I put them in the earth. My fennel is self-seeding, it comes back. My horseradish is self-seeding, it comes back. Just leave it in the ground. I've got cabbage over here, cauliflower, broccoli. There's a head of iceberg lettuce going to seed. Oh my goodness, that's lemon balm. This basil. This is our what they plant for basically that survives well. It's what I want to say. I'm struggling with my words. It's like a hybrid that will survive in our climate. Okay, this is 3 years old. This is my potato bed right in here. You don't see anything because I've already harvested the potatoes, and what I do is I put a seed potato back in the earth at the moment I'm harvesting, and I cover it back up, and Elohim brings it forth in the correct timing. And so the same with my garlic. It shares the drip irrigation around the trees, and like the potatoes, you just harvest and replant at the same time, and you allow the rest to happen according to the cycle of the land. I'm really excited for my pawpaw, or my papaya plant. You'll see he is sprouting new crowns on the lower part of the trunk. I've been wanting to prune him, but he's done so well, and I've never had a papaya tree before, and I've been afraid to top him. You can see there was a bird's nest up in there, but he's already putting on. These will not be ready until the next hot season. This will continue to get tall, make fruit, bloom, until the cold and the rain comes, and it'll go dormant. And then just like when these were from last year, when the hot season comes, then the fruit from last year will ripen. And these are small because they were from the end of the season. We've ate the papaya from here this year. Like I said, we have had so many pawpaws this year. It's just crazy. And because we had that very warm, cold season, it was very warm this year, these continued to ripe. We had maybe 3 weeks when we weren't getting some kind of papaya harvest off this plant. So yeah, and then I also do just a chop and drop. In a stagnant garden, you feed back to the earth what the plant has taken from the earth. You know, I don't believe in crop rotation. That's not the model of our Creator. He brings that barley and wheat back every year in that same location, if nobody bothers it, and that plant rots and decays there and puts back into the earth the things it took. And so we have this cycle of the plant is growing where it's happy to grow, and you're going to keep feeding back into the earth the things that it took from the earth. I have got to get that eggplant harvested and find some homes for them. But I'll show you, I saved this to show you what I do in the garden. So what I've done here is I've dropped the okra seeds right back in that okra bed. And I'm just going to, because it comes at a hotter time of year when the rains have shut off, it's not a spring vegetable. You can see that one right there peeking up. I'm watering this a good hour every day to keep the wood chips and the seeds wet. Once this gets established, I'm going to turn the water off because the drip irrigation will carry it. Over here, I'm going to take you through the process of what I did. This was my arugula spinach. All my leafy greens grew in here. And you can see I've let it die and dry. And now I'm going to flip those seed heads back in that bed, clean all of this out. I'm going to throw away the sticker plants, stinging nettle. Take all of those leaves and that debris, put it in top of this bed, on the bed, after I seed it with the seed heads from, this is arugula, I've got spinach in there I see some lettuces that have gone to seed. After I put that back on the surface, and there's some more leaves I'm going to add to it, I'm going to cover it with a thin layer of carbon or mulch. That's all I'm going to do until next rainy season, and this will come back on its own. That came in my load of mulch are germinating in this environment, and I will use these for shade in the garden. Remember, there was nothing here. There was this tree and there was this tree, and this orange tree was dead. We're starting to get a few oranges from it, but I'll intersperse the video I'm making now with a video of what was before, so you can see the difference between what was and what is in basically a year and a half. My papaya tree, we have ate so many papaya this year. I'm just giving, or pawpaws, take your choice. I'm just giving it away. I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. I'm thinking strawberries. This is my my passiflora, my passion fruit. There's his stalk. He had about 2 or 3 of those stems like the one in front with about 5 or 7 leaves, and now he is, and remember, this is his second full season. Now he compasses the whole fence, and he's even climbing above the old bomb shelter. Let me turn you this way. There's my grapevine that was dead, and I went on the internet and I read about it and cut him back, and he sprung back to life. Unfortunately, these are not supposed to be trimmed. I found out the hard way. These are the older ones, and he didn't bear any grapes, but my neighbor who has one just like it, hers are just covered up with grapes right now. So here is that passion fruit from that center stem, and he has reached the carport. Of course, I'll include videos of this section too. That's my sweet peas. I'm letting the seeds drop on that, then I'll pull the plants up. That's a volunteer. They came back from last year. That's the fig tree that Abba gave me. Found it growing in the yard, and I pruned it severely, and he came back so strong with so many figs. Of course, another moringa tree. This was all empty, and there's stuff in the front yard I won't take you to, but you know, All I can say is I don't know of another inspector who has been blessed to be allowed to do what I'm doing. And it is a blessing and it is an allowance of Elohim to actually work on the earth and understand the season and understand that there's a specific timing when these grains are born, and be the one who notices that and goes out and checks them as soon as they break the earth. So this little guy, I'm going to try to save him. He's still green. He's going in the ground today. He's a sad story, but he's a rescue. So I think we'll save him. Pretty sure he's going to save. So that's the story of what my father has asked me to do to train me. This is my training ground, my proving ground. This is where he shows me so many things about not only the earth, but understanding the timing of that earth. Did you know? I don't think anybody else in Israel does this. I plant according to the biblical calendar. As soon as that barley breaks the surface of the earth, my leafy greens are being sowed into the earth. My spinach, my cabbages, my arugulas, my bok choy, all of those things. As soon as that little head of grass, cereal grass, breaks the surface of the earth, I'm out here sowing my tender greens. Sweet potato vines. I've got sweet potatoes everywhere. These are sweet potatoes. There's thyme there. My goodness, there's that big old eggplant. I have volunteer tomatoes everywhere. There's tomatoes there. My goodness. There's a struggling cucumber, and I'm fine with that, and with that tomato. There's another tomato plant over there. I don't have as much planted this year for reasons that I won't get into. More thing, I use these to control slugs. I lay them around my tender greens at the beginning of the year because they don't like to crawl on top of that metal. Worked pretty good. That, and I use two-step method. I use the copper's better, but the scrubby for scrubbing pots and pans, and I use containers of beer that they can crawl into, and I tell you, it worked wonders. This is last year's garden cress. You can see the husks, the paper on the seeds there. Those little round purses have the seed inside. I am just going to run my hand across that and leave the husk in place and spread it on top of the earth here before I cover the earth with some of this dry foliage and other foliage that I'll gather during the year. This will, being covered with the husk in place, this will be a more natural timing for when these seeds are sprouted again, because it'll take time for that husk to deteriorate. A certain amount of moisture will have to penetrate that, and it will have to yield itself a little bit. So I have all of this cleaned, all of the greens from before. I've taken the soft foliage that was left on the dry plant and the seeds and just dropped it back on the earth. Now I'm going to come in with my worm compost. I have composting worms that turns on my garden. Oh, I missed a guy. He's got to go back in the bin. You try to sort the worms out of the compost so you have workers to make more fertilizer. He's in there someplace. I guess it won't hurt to lose one. They can't live outside of a closed environment. Anyway, oh, there he is. So I am going to see how small they are. They're really small. They're not big at all. But they sure make fast work of making, gosh, bioavailable compost, fertilizer for your garden. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to start throwing some of this on top here and there. Doesn't take much. Then I'm going to go ahead and plant some things like squash, about 4 different squash in here. And this will grow, the squash will grow now. When it's finished, I'll just cut the vine off above the earth. And then when the rains come again, this will come back up in greens. So I'm not going to let this just lay fallow. I'm making double use of this. Those seeds have been redistributed from all of the greens that went to seed. I let them go to seed purposefully. And now I'm going to lay some worm castings on top of it, which, by the way, will not burn your plants, will not burn anything. It's a cold fertilizer. It's really great. Can't say enough good things about my 3 bins of composting worms that make my fertilizer. Put the compost down, put the squash seeds in, then I'm going to cover it back up with the mulch, the leaves that lay here and in the wheelbarrow, and then I've got some round on the other side, some leaves I'm going to rake up. Put that on top. I'll add compost to this throughout the summer, throughout the hot months, and I'll find leaves and grass clippings and I'll add to the top of this, and that will keep the moisture and keep, yeah. So this is that closed system. I'll put this netting back on top of it because I have a beautiful little Eurasian bird, a few of them, who are opportunistic and will dig up these, not only the soaker hoses out of the big garden behind me, but flip out the plants and whatever's left so that they can take the opportunity to look for insects below that. So I've got to keep my hoses buried. And I think I've got a plan for the rest of the garden to keep them from digging up my drip hose. Oh, this is my lemongrass. I got to go turn my water off. This is just about 2 years old. Turn my irrigation off to my trees in the front. I'll show that to you at a later time. I know a subsequent video needs to happen because this is too long. Here's my herbs, my newly planted herbs this year. There's 3 kinds of lavender there. Of course, my humongous aloe. I need to get in here and thin them out. Put some aloe vera gel in the freezer. This is almost like a menthol. It's like it's called oh my goodness, Zuta lavana. Another moringa tree that I planted from seed. That's Syrian oregano. They call this lemon geranium. It's really Sertonella. See my apple tree, 2nd year from my apple tree. Another type of aloe vera, Romano's Hebrew, rosemary. Another basil. This is a Mexican sage and a volunteer lantana. I just cut that back and he just keeps coming back. I'm going to cut him back again. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tour of that beautiful, sustainable forested garden. So I'll break down, one of the last things I'll do is I'll break down those terms for you. Sustainable just means that you don't work to bring forth your food very much and the garden sustains itself. That garden has begun the process of reseeding itself. Only if I want to bring in new varieties of food do I need to plant seeds, and I will be doing that this year. I'll be bringing in a more variety of the leafy greens. And forested is because we live in the Middle East, and I have the mulch that keeps the root of the plant cool, as well as the drip irrigation that keeps it wet, nourished from the earth with the wet soil. And then I have a canopy over it, which is the forested part, to keep the hot summer sun, or the hot sun, off of the plants. In the rainy season, those plants get cut back and the sun is allowed to warm the earth and the rain to pass through. I'm kind of excited. I'm going to do a little bit of catch-up work. I'm going to be planting some black corn, some Indian corn. I've got a few other things. Okra should be coming up. I've got a few other things that are going to be showing up in the garden over the next weeks, and maybe as we progress in the growing season, I will take you back into the garden and I will show you the garden when it's very full, because it's a lot of fun to be in there. It's amazing how much that will support in that system. The garden can be so full that you can barely turn around. So just let me encourage you that, if you need a computer technician, you usually go to someone that's trained to do that type of work. If you need a mechanic, you usually go to someone who's trained to do that type of work. If you need a pharmacist, you usually go to someone who's trained to do that type of work. As far as I know, I'm the only one that Elohim has been training in the growing of food and the producing of food in the land of Israel of the people who inspect. So I want to encourage you just to consider, your source. It's so easy to pick a personality rather than an ability. And I would really encourage you to seek out that one who has that ability to report to you from a perspective of one who successfully grows their fruits and vegetables here in this arid, dry region where the words of the scripture is written for that biblical calendar. So thank you for watching and wish you shalom.